is a real danger, I believe, when it comes to televisions these days. They are almost too complex to use easily. When it comes to the living room telly, then surely less is more. And believe me when I say that this 65-inch Q90R from Samsung is an absolute glory to use. And the setup is definitely in the less category, but beware of the menus. I have to wonder who uses all of these settings rather than just switching it on, sitting back and basking in one of the finest images that I have ever seen on a TV screen. Okay, so I'm going down a bit of a twin path here. Complex menus, stunning pictures. Let's just split things up. Samsung, as many of you will know, have their own measuring guide on the quality of their panels. They call this a PQI, or Picture Quality Index. Now we have a 55-inch that sits at around 1500 PQI, and it is some years old now, but it does admittedly still look pretty amazing. So when the Q90R showed up with a PQI of 4000 right at the top of the scale, I already knew it had a lot to live up to. One of my many mantras is, if you can't see the difference or hear it, then it doesn't matter. Oh boy, can you see the difference, alright, in this glorious, magnificent beast of a TV. And the sound? These skinny TVs are supposed to have rubbish sound, but this is glorious for such a skinny set. But this Samsung Q90R sounds almost as good as it looks, and I was generally shocked and very pleased at the same time. It is about time that these boffins figured out how to get decent sound into the small flat panel TVs, and surely it can only get better from here. Now it also sits on a central stand as well, so there's no worrying about it fitting on a unit, so long as it can take the actual weight of the TV itself. Now let's talk about the setup. Instead of all the HDMI cables or power and maybe an optical all hanging out the back of the actual set itself, the panel is connected to one largest box where all of the connections go. Even power. All of those signals and power are then transferred to the actual panel by a single pretty darn thin ribbon. No idea how reliable this is going to be, but I don't see any reason why it should be a problem, as it really neatens everything up a treat and gives you the opportunity to mount the TV on the wall without having to channel out massive chunks of your wall, to kind of channel the cables so you can't see any cables. You've just got one ribbon that goes from the box to the TV, so minimal channeling necessary to get this TV on the wall. Now around the actual back of the box you can find 4 HDMI inputs, one of them that has arc return. There is an optical port, an aerial satellite input, and an Ethernet port to hardwire your internet. So once I plugged in my HDMI devices, I powered on the TV and away I went. There is the usual Samsung on-screen setup stuff to do, which can also be done from your smartphone via a Samsung app. Now it's a little bit tedious to get the two to connect, but simple enough once connected. And here is where I do have a problem with modern televisions. Well, a lot of modern devices really. Now they seem to be getting an ability to become more complex with menus under menus for stuff you are not sure you're probably gonna need, unless of course you are a fussy cinema buff who likes to tune their picture settings to perfection. With the Samsung Q90R, those settings are all here, so don't worry about that. However, I must say that the actual operating system that Samsung TVs have is one of the best, if not the best on the market. Having the system tray with all of your settings at the bottom is really quite innovative, and you can see all of your apps in front of you and can get those apps very easily using the D-pad on the remote control. You will find all of the usual on-demand apps and streaming apps pre-installed like Netflix, Amazon Prime, BBC iPlayer, 4OD, 5 on Demand, and Rakuten. But now you will also notice that there is the inclusion of Apple TV, which is a very first for Samsung, and now also Now TV as well. So granted, the Samsung Q90R worked brilliantly from the box, which begs the question on why are there still certain settings there. Things like brightness, contrast, volume, etc. Sure, of course, but several sound modes which seemed to always switch back to adaptive from wherever I had left it during the previous viewing. Just annoying. Samsung have implemented a new type of technology here called Ultra Viewing Angle. This technology uses several layers to its panel in kind of light leakage, which gives the Samsung Q90R some absolutely fantastic viewing angles, right up to near 180 degrees. Now colors remain vibrant and back levels super crisp and super deep. Now it's easy to notice that Samsung, compared to their previous models, have definitely worked on the image quality delivered to its users with the Q90R. Colours now seem a lot more natural, and the cooler tone definitely helps when it comes to warmer images like sunsets and even skin tones. I not once found myself diving towards the remote control to correct the colours to what I was watching. Furthermore, the Quantum processor does a wonderful job with HDR content by adding more detail in the blacks and keeping the highlights well under control. Now, of course, you will need some form of HDR source to watch to get that HDR image quality. It can be quite hard to tell what is HDR and what's not, but Samsung have implemented HDR10+ here on their Q90R. What is impressive here as well is the local backlight dimming, which I noticed quite heavily when I was using subtitles on Netflix while watching Planet Earth. There was a halo effect surrounding the subtitles while the rest of the image was a murky dark night scene of the Arctic. Detail though, even in a darkened image, was absolutely incredible, and even though the image was so dark, you could still see everything like curves in the landscape or craters in the ice super clearly. Now when it got to the day and all of the little penguins were running around and flapping about, it was just absolutely breathtaking. The dark fur on the back mixed with the white fur on their bellies looked absolutely wonderful and just incredibly sharp. Like you could really reach out and stroke one of them. It was, when I first saw it, it was wonderful. You can't find a TV better. Now, watching something like Better Call Saul, for example, there was a scene where Saul was using a flashlight in the dark. The contrast between the dark areas and sections lit up by the flashlight was, again, absolutely stunning. And Vince Gilligan's trademark orange hue that was flooding in from a small window was just looked absolutely flawless. And as I said before, there's really no setting you have to change to get this TV working at its best. The nice thing about the Samsung Q90R is, from the box, you're getting a pretty decent, stunning image anyway. You're not going to have to then dive into a menu straight off the back. Give all of the automatic setup options a chance first. Now sure, the motion processing that Samsung install onto their televisions now is a little lackluster, but if you control this and keep them to a minimum, then the small amount of blur reduction and judder reduction can actually work quite well, but doesn't quite remove all of the artifacts and fall short of keeping an image smooth, often failing during intense camera movements. Set them too high, however, and you get this really horrible over-processed image, and no one wants that whatsoever. So I would either set them low, turn them off altogether. The Quantum 4K processor that Samsung has implemented here also works a treat. It's a very similar process to the 8K Q900 range, where the AI chip would use its vast database of images and video to attempt to produce the best possible image quality. Now here the image only has to get to a 4K resolution. For standard definition content that you could typically receive through broadcast television, for example, was hugely noticeable on the upscale. On HD 1080p, for example, we were even gaming through an Xbox One. Not really so much. One word of warning though, there is an intelligent mode that will automatically detect the settings you will need for your image and sound depending on the size of your room. Turn it off. The brightness constantly raising and lowering alone will just be enough to put you off of this telly, so just get rid of that setting. So I want to give a shout out to Samsung, as we had this TV sent to us along with its flagship soundbar, the Samsung Q80R, with two wireless powered rear speakers, so you don't need wires to them. There were a couple of instances, however, when the soundbar wouldn't quite work for us. The first was when we used it with the ARC return on the HDMI ports. It took a very long time for the television to actually recognize that the soundbar was plugged in. The second was strange, and it was with audio sync from certain sources like broadcast television through my Virgin box. I happened to be in John Lewis and spoke to the Samsung chap there, and he was pretty baffled as to why we could not sync the lips with the audio. Now you can find a delay adjustment setting in the sound options menu, but damned if I could line up the two. And also, it's 2019, why do I need to? Surely this sort of thing should just work, right? Now this is the first time with all the Samsung equipment we have had over the years that we have ever experienced this. Could it have been a glitch? Was it just our test machine that we were sent? I just don't know. Hardly any sound came out of the rear speakers either, and yes, they were turned up. Get the right film on Netflix though, and it just all burst into life. Now this could have been down to the fact that standard television stations are not broadcasting surround sound codecs, so rely on the soundbar only, and it could be the fact that Netflix with most of their movies now stream Dolby 5.1 as a minimum. I just couldn't say, but it was very annoying. I would have liked to have seen Samsung compensate the sound and turn the rear speakers into stereo left and right as well. So the whole thing just acts as stereo left and right, so you still get an equal amount of sound out of both left and right speakers. Now I might have thought that was that, but I do have an older 5.1 Tallboy surround sound system, and that supplies plenty of sound from the rears during all sorts of conventional programs. It's just a weird one. We just didn't know what to do. When it did work though, it was incredible, and the giant sub shook the floor upstairs. So why not during normal shows? Again, glitch, our test system, our setup ignorance, which brings me back to wondering if these sorts of things is getting too difficult to use for someone who just wants to watch the best telly around. Now don't get me wrong, even though I've mentioned a couple of issues here, I still want one, but for the present price of £2,700 plus around £1,000 to £1,500 for the sound system, it will probably need to wait because I don't have that kind of money laying around. It's a very expensive set, but it is truly remarkable. So thank you very much for checking out our video review of the Samsung 65 Q90R and the Samsung Q80R soundbar. If you've enjoyed this video, then do click that like button. Please do subscribe to keep up with our latest tech and gaming videos, and also let us know in the comments below what you think about this TV, whether you would go for something like this, the 65 Q90R. I mean, just look at that image, wonderful. And if you would pair it with the soundbar, or you would spend that up to £1,500 on some kind of 5.1 separates or even an Atmos system now. As I say, thank you very much for watching this review, and we will see you in the next video.